This week on Reedsy Live, it's Pitch Wars. Hello and welcome to the very first Reedsy Pitch Wars, where folks just like you at home have sent in pitches for books and they're going to battle it out and we're going to declare one winner. Thank you for joining us today. This is our very first one of these events, inspired by the sadly missed Pitch Wars series on Twitter. That has gone sadly now, but we've taken up the mantle and we're just inspired by the name mostly. But really, really grateful that so many of you are joining us here today. We had over 1,500 submissions of pitches to this event. We're going to pick our top 12, one or two from each of the genres we set out. They're going to battle it out, and from those winners, is going to be one champion declared at the end. This is an opportunity for folks at home to sort of see what works when one is pitching a book, either to collaborators or to agents, publishers, to know what it takes to have an idea and get it across in such a way that will get other people excited about it. So we have a lot to get through, so I'm going to just jump straight to introducing our guests. Our esteemed judges today are publishing insiders. One is an agent at top New York agency Evita's Creative Management. His resume includes extensive editorial work both at Penguin Random House and for Reedsy, where you can find him should you need him. The other is an author, best-selling ghostwriter, former commissioning editor at Little Brown, and now head of learning at Reedsy, where he teaches our premium novel writing course. Please welcome John Darger and Tom Bromley. Welcome, gentlemen. How are you today? Well, long time...
I heard Tom open his mouth to talk, and then I was going to let him talk, and now
this was going so smooth. It was going so tight. It was like proper TV.
In auspicious start live programming.
So, John, how are you? We've had you on before to do some of our pitch critiques before, and to do some of our first paragraph ones with Rebecca Heyman. How have you been?
I've been well. It's been busy, but it's summer here in Michigan, and sun is shining. The weather is good, and it's a lovely time of year to be alive and doing a webinar.
Fantastic, Tom. I believe you are in London currently. Is that correct?
I'm in sunny Salisbury, actually, this evening. So just in the West Country, near Stonehenge.
Fantastic. Strange enough, as I mentioned before, I've read through all 1,500 pitches, and of the pitches set in the UK, there were unusual amounts set in the West Country. So there must be something in the water there.
Definitely. Well, there's lots of ley lines around here if you're into that kind of thing. So maybe people are drawing on that for inspiration.
Great. So today is all about pitches, about... the sort of thing that you might include in a query letter if you're reaching out to agents or publishers, but it's sort of a shortened version, the elevator pitch. Tom, when someone's sort of pitching you a book, whether that's in your capacity as an editor or maybe as a collaborator, what is it that you want to see? What makes you excited?
I think the key things for me in a pitch that you want to have in there, I think the most important thing is story. I think that's what pitches are about fundamentally. You've got to get a sense of what the narrative is about. Conflict, I think, is really important. And conflict where the outcome is unclear. I want to read that pitch and feel I'm interested in knowing where this is going to go. I'm not quite sure where it's going to go. Change, if you can get that into the mix somewhere. And then I think the other thing that's really, really important is making it specific rather than general. I think it's very easy when you've only got 100 words or however many words it is that you start moving into platitudes to try and kind of cover everything that's in the book. But the more specific you can make the pitch, the stronger it usually is.
Cool. And John, anything to sort of add to that? What sort of gets you going?
Yeah, well, the rude thing about having Tom go first is that I have my checklist of things that I wrote down to say I look for in a pitch. And as Tom talked, it was just crossing one off right after the other because he pretty much nailed it. Specifics was a big one to me. I think that as counterintuitive as it can sound, you get to the universal through the specific. And so I think that sharing as many details about character, plot, setting, what makes your story unique as you can fit in a pitch is important. For me, it's stakes. What are the stakes? What is at risk? Should the main character fail at their quest, fail at what they're trying to achieve? Why do we care? What is there to lose? That's a big thing that I look for.
Great. Well, before we get to the finalists from each of our categories, I've just picked a few sort of notable honourable mentions. These are ones that sort of jumped out to me for one reason or another that I thought we could go through just to sort of get an idea of what sometimes might not work or sometimes what can work. So thank you to those of you who sent these ones in. Again, this is not looking to sort of poo-poo or build up anyone's ideas. This is largely about the pitch and how that is coming across. For these ones, I'll read them out. And yeah, I'll love to get your reactions on them. First honourable mention is Beyond Darkness by A.J. Eddy. In the captivating narrative of Beyond Darkness, we are immersed in Death's Odyssey, a journey that takes him from the realm of mortals to one of gods. As he traverses a world teeming with peril, he grapples with the complexities of his existence. This enthralling journey is punctuated by his encounters with unconventional allies and his battles with harrowing adversaries. Each of these challenges offers a glimpse into the depths of his inner struggles, intensifying the narrative. Through this compelling tale, the story unfolds as a profound exploration of self-discovery, the quest for redemption, and the enduring resilience of hope. Now, John, this is, I think, the first time you've seen this. What is your sort of initial reaction to this?
Yes, Tom and I took different approaches for this. I'll share to the audience. Tom, I believe, read all of these prior to, and I like to react cold. So he'll be much more prepared, but you'll get kind of the off the cuff reaction from me. I think this is a lot of promise, and I also make the disclaimer that I'm aware that these pitches have a word and character count, and there's certain information that I'll say, I would have loved to see XYZ that you might be able to fit into a longer query letter that just doesn't fit in this pitch form. There might be authors watching who make groans of frustration and say, if I had had one more paragraph, that would have been in there. So I understand the frustration. I think for me, this is missing a little bit of stakes. I think that it's a really interesting concept and really interesting hook to talk about Death's Odyssey. But, that's such an interesting, meaty concept to sink your teeth into. I'm wondering, first of all, why? What triggers Death's need to go on this odyssey at this point in time? One must imagine that Death has kind of been operating for in a pretty successful manner for quite some time, and that there must have been something to trigger this journey of introspection and self-discovery. So I'm kind of interested in what that inciting incident is. And I think the stakes would or should be pretty high with Death itself or himself or whatever I see, whatever journey he's going on. And I'm, wondering what happens if Death is having this kind of midlife crisis of self-discovery, of redemption, of seeking redemption and hope. What happens if Death doesn't find that? What happens to the operating structure of the world? So those are kind of the questions that this raised. And I think that it's a successful pitch in the sense that it's making me ask these questions and it's intriguing me and it's making me want to find the answer to these questions. But it is something that, I would perhaps like to see hinted at or included a little bit more in this paragraph.
Tom, just quickly, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, two things I'd mention in particular. I think it needs a little bit more focus. I think John's right, there's a lot in here, but if you look at that final sentence where it's been described as a profound exploration of self-discovery, the quest for redemption, and the enduring resilience of hope, that's three big things going on there. And I think really the story should, at its heart, be about one thing centrally. So if I was the author here, I'd be thinking, okay, which is the most important, and make the story more about that and make the pitch more about that. And the other thing I would say as well, when you're pitching, it's very tempting to sell yourself, but I would let the words and let the story do that for you. So words like telling the agent or editor this narrative is captivating. It's compelling. There's another one as well, enthralling. I would try and avoid using words like that. Let the agent or the editor or whoever it is make their own judgment on that. But there's clearly a lot in here, but needs a little bit more unpacking for it to feel fully realised for me.
Okay, I'm going to do one more from this honourable mentions list. I'm just aware of the time. Want to make sure we have time for the finalists there. This one is a non-fiction one. 10 Years Down the Drain by Guy Venter. This is me, the plumber guy, pitching for my plumbing memoir, 10 Years Down the Drain. It's 87,000 words of unbelievable experiences, lifting the lid on what happens at the hands of the great British public and plugging a hole in the non-fiction book market where such memoirs don't exist. From a customer flushing a toilet while I'm deep in their sewer to very possibly being molested by a mad cat lady, this book will do for trades what Fever Pitch did for football, and This Is Going to Hurt did for medicine. Enjoy! Tom, what's your first reaction to that?
My first reaction, I'm afraid to say, it did make me laugh. Both the idea of kind of lifting the lid and plugging a hole in the non-fiction book market. I think when I was a commissioning editor, I used to do what was called kind of non-serious non-fiction, and these slightly alternative, unusual autobiographies was something I did. And actually, reading this reminded me of that time. I mean, I can't think of a plumbing book out there, but I could see potentially how this could work. I like the fact that this author has done their research. You've got those comparisons with different titles that have been, kind of bestsellers here in the UK, which is always a good sign. It will all be in the writing. I mean, it's an unusual thing to read 80,000 words about plumbing, but if the voice is good, if the stories are good, if you can widen it out into a kind of more a narrative about the guy or about I don't know, there's issues in the UK with sewage in the rivers, for example, at the moment. There may be things you can make this a little bit wider. But actually, I read that and thought, if I was still a commissioning editor, I would read this and see if the writing is good enough to justify it. But I like it as an idea.
John, what were your first reactions?
I think that this does a remarkably good job of capturing voice in a short pitch. You read this and you immediately have a clear sense of what the voice and the sense of humor and the style on the page is going to be. I think it's to what Tom said, it's you read this and you don't immediately think, yes, the publishing world needs a plumbing memoir, but the pitch is intriguing enough that you think, but I'm interested in seeing if maybe it does. My two kind of more critical notes that I made are, memoir and nonfiction in general these days is very reliant on platform. I was unclear. The plumber guy is capitalized in the pitch. I was unclear if that was if it was maybe referring to a popular social media platform where he's known as the plumber guy. If he just calls himself the plumber guy, that to me needed a little more contextualization as to what that meant. And it just flagged briefly for me that there will be some people who you're pitching to who are a little turned off by the using being molested, sexually assaulted, whatever, as a punchline here. Clearly, the author has a good sense of humor about it. It clearly was not a traumatic incident for him. And, one could argue that if an agent or editor did not find that funny, that it would be good to know up front because the manuscript probably won't be for them. But if you're crafting your pitch to be palatable and appealing to the widest possible audience, you might want to stay away from using things like, I was molested by this person as a punchline, would be my only note.
Great. Thank you. All right. Oops. Let me undo this one. And with that out of the way, thank you both of you for sending that one in. We're going to the first of our competitive categories, which is fiction, which we rolled into contemporary, historical, literary. A lot of great stuff sent in for this one. But let's go for the first one here. Tom, do you want to read this one out?
Sure, I'll give this a go. So this is a pitch for a book called The Port of Old John by Zev Lawson Edwards. Two babies, inadvertently switched at birth, try to find their way home as adults during the tumultuous 60s. Miles, free-spirited and artistic, is raised in the affluent suburbs of Chicago by John Bircher parents, while Gustavus, pragmatic and industrious, grows up with his mammy and Lola in a one-room hut in the magical Port of Old John, where it rains sardines and stories are as tall as they are true.
All right, Tom, what was your reaction to this one?
I mean, this is fiction, which we're calling quite widely. So this is sort of literary fiction, or kind of booklet fiction, or however you want to describe it. I like this actually. I think that first sentence gives you the story and the plot, and that sums it up extremely well. We've got our two central characters summarised. You can see the difference between them. We've got a bit of location in there. So I think it does quite a lot. It doesn't have that extra bit there for me at the end. So having switched places, having found, their way home, what happens next? Where does this lead? And I talked earlier on about this idea of change, and I don't get that moment in there. The other thing that I always think is interesting in these kind of books where you've got two protagonists is which one is more important. And the fact that this book is called The Port of Old John is sort of saying to me that rather than this feeling balanced, this is more about one of the characters than the others, perhaps. If that's not the case, I'd have a look at that. And the other thing I would say as well is in that opening sentence, we talk about the time setting, the tumultuous 60s, but that doesn't come back in again. So I wasn't quite sure how that fitted in the story with it being a sort of period piece rather than the present day. But I think that the idea and the concept at its heart is really, really interesting.
John?
Yeah, I thought that the voice and the atmosphere was captured very well here. Again, kind of like not the same vibe, but what we were talking about with the plumbing memoir, you get a kind of a clearer sense of what the voice on the page might be like, which is effective. I completely agree with what Tom is saying in the sense that you do know the plot, but you don't have enough of the plot to forecast what the book might be like. Like, I know from this pitch that these twins are, or not twins, I guess, babies, now adults, are trying to find their way home. I don't know what that means. I don't know what home means to them. I don't know if they're trying to find each other. I don't know, how they figured out they were switched at birth. I don't know what that journey entails, if it's like a homeward bound situation where they're hitchhiking across the country, if it's more of a spiritual journey. So this technically checks the box of giving us what the plot is, but I don't feel like it fulfills the spirit of that kind of checklist item where it allows me to get a sense of what the book is. I also, that last line threw me off personally with the magical port of Old John where it rains sardines and the stories are tall as they are true. Again, that provides a lot of good voice and atmosphere, but I don't know what that means in terms of the book. I don't know if this is going to be a magic realist book. I don't know if that means it's going to, kind of have these heightened experiences. I don't know if it's going to be positioned as, a tale that one of these adults is telling a loved one, at the end of his life. That in the current context, it introduced more confusion to me about how the material will be presented on the page and how the book will read than it did clarity. So I would maybe clean that up, or this is a shorter pitch than the others, so there might have been more room to add another sentence or two that kind of makes that clear. But it was a little muddy to me how that kind of magical heightened aspect fit into things.
All right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was just to add in, I absolutely agree. I think if you literally adding one more sentence at the end where it kind of pulls it together will make this a kind of much, much better pitch, I think.
Great. All right, we have our second one from this category. John, if you'd be so kind.
Sure. This is Quest for the Streets of Fire, a rollicking title, by Kirsten Lambertson. After defying her editor, a star Rolling Stone reporter finds herself in the middle of nowhere, Colorado, as punishment. Her assignment: write a fluff piece about a local fan club dedicated to the 1980s rock opera flop film Streets of Fire. But her resentment quickly turns to disbelief and dread. The club's charismatic leader, a beloved mother and popular bakery owner, has turned the group into a massive and metastasizing conspiracy theory cult that's torn the town apart. And with some help from the power of social media, it's about to do the same to the country. It's a good pitch. It's very clear. It's interesting. It's just quirky enough to feel unique and capture attention, but it has more significant stakes. You get a sense of what's her name? Oh, you don't get her name. It's just a star Rolling Stone reporter. I might include the character's name in the pitch as a point of clarity. But you get a clear sense of even from the sense that she defied her editor. She's now kind of pissed about writing this fluff piece. I liked that. Kind of same, what I find in these sorts of events are that you end up kind of giving somewhat similar feedback as they go on, because a lot of writers do the same things. Similar to the last one, I think this could use one more sentence at the end to tie it together. I think that it's a wonderful, I hesitate to say perfect setup, but I don't know what I would do to change the first, 4 or 5 sentences of this pitch. But I think that it feels rushed at the end. With some help from the power of social media, it's about to do the same to the country. How, what, how is the big question that I have. And then, what is unfurling past that, and what can this star Rolling Stone reporter do about it? Quite frankly, I think it just needs that one more sentence to tie all of that together and say, here's how it's sweeping the nation. Here's what might happen. Here's what the character can do to stop it.
Tom, what are your thoughts?
Slightly different, actually. For me, this is a pitch in two halves. So when I was reading it, that first half, I was expecting something lighter and more comic. I'm old enough to and sad enough to remember this not very successful film, kind of Streets of Fire. So I was fascinated that there was it's a proper 1980s film.
Oh, I thought it was a fictional film that was made for created for the book.
No, I think I'm right. It's a real life terrible film from the early
Walter
80s.
Hill film is the guy who made The Warriors, and it was supposed to be sort of, I guess, a spiritual sequel to that, but it was like notorious flop.
Wow.
So I was going to say, so I think that the first half I was set up thinking, okay, I can see this is going to be comic, this is going to be funny, and then the second half took it in a slightly different, darker place for me. So for me, the two halves didn't quite match up in terms of voice. I started to think it was going to be one thing, and then it ended up being something else. So I think that sort of tone and the voice needs to be more kind of consistent throughout, and maybe things like fluff piece and the way that talking about the film needs to be. You get that little bit of darkness in there earlier on. I wanted to know what the cult was, what the theory was that is being pushed, and as John says, we need to know why our protagonist is the person he's going to save the day. What is it about her, her particularly, who was going to kind of solve this crisis and end the narrative. And I think, as John says as well, I think names are really, really important. So we're not mentioning the name of the Rolling Stone reporter or the club's charismatic leader. I think we've got those two central characters, obviously key for the book, but sticking those names in there, I think is really, really useful. But yeah, as I say, I was just slightly unsure about the tone of it. For me, it started as though it started in one place and then ended somewhere else.
Cool. All right, so we've hit the point with these two ones, The Port of Old John or Quest for the Streets of Fire. We need to pick a winner between the two. John, which of these two is your choice?
My vote goes to Quest for the Streets of Fire.
Tom?
My vote goes for Port of Old John.
We already need a tiebreaker for the first round.
All right, I'm going to have to stick in in terms of the one I think that I want to read the most, maybe because I read a bit more and sort of inferred a bit more than was on the page. I think Port of Old John takes it for me. All right, so hopefully we won't have too many of these tiebreakers going on, but here I am doing my part. Okay, that is fiction over, and now let's move on to our next category, which is children's books. This is, I think, we're open to anything from picture books all the way through early readers, middle grade, and even we had some YA ones. Okay, Tom, do you want to take this first one here?
Okay, yeah, so this is called The Wonder-Filled Nora Minlay, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, by Nina Fan. And it goes like this. Nora has a plan. Get to Lady Liberty Music Conservatory by 5:55 for the audition of her life, without her mother knowing, as Nora's dreams of becoming a pianist would turn into a different kind of dream, a figment of her imagination. After being told by a mysterious man that she would never come out of the L train, Nora steps in anyways and stumbles into a world where alive is New York City. After a treacherous race through Natanam, Nora learns the key to living her best life includes 88 wooden ones and one golden. Never stop listening to your heart. So there's quite a lot going on in this one, and again, I mean, it's a pitch of two halves, kind of more literally so in this one because it's divided into two paragraphs. Um, that first paragraph is a single sentence. It's a slightly confusing sentence. It's got two kind of colons in there, and actually, I sort of had to read it through a couple of times when I saw it originally to make it clear in my mind exactly what was going on. And I think when you're sending a pitch in, clarity is really, really important. I think there's a really interesting story in there, and there's a nice kind of setup, but it's slightly unclear in terms of how it's written. Having had that setup, what then happens in the second paragraph feels to me to be in a slightly different place to the first. So she goes down. She's told not to get on this train. She goes on it. Again, I wonder if there's a word missing or something. Stumbles into a world where alive is New York City. We've got Manhattan backwards, so I presume she's in some kind of parallel world or something like that. So there's something interesting there to explore, but that doesn't match up particularly with what's happening in the first paragraph. And then this final line, which is a really nice line about learning the key to living your best life includes 88 wooden ones and one golden. Never stop listening to your heart. It feels a little bit like she knows that already in the first paragraph because she's desperate to kind of, get this audition and get in because she wants to be a pianist. So what is she learning in this second bit that she doesn't know already? So I would say for me, there's a lot of interesting ideas in here, but they don't feel fully distilled or kind of fully formed. There's still a little bit of work to be done to kind of tease the story out, but I can absolutely see there's a lot of interesting ideas in here to play with, but it's not quite the finished article for me as yet.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think, not that we're judging these from the same criteria, but I am a fan. Martin, you mentioned Becca Heyman earlier in this, and I'm a big fan of her First Line Frenzy events. I know she does some on Reedsy. She has her Instagram channel, and while we're not playing the first sentence game with these pitches, immediately upon reading this, Becca's voice popped into my head that first sentence is a cheating sentence. It is not a true sentence. You cannot have like two colons and all of that in the sentence. It is a fraudulent sentence and should in fact be 2 or 3. But I don't think it should be 2 or 3 because I think what's really interesting is that second paragraph. And I think to what Tom said, that first sentence is even a little bit misleading in terms of tone and what's setting you up for. So I think you want that first sentence to be as fast, short, and efficient as possible so that you can move on to kind of that meat of the book. I think, you really can just say, Nora needs to get to the audition of her life by 5:55 p.m. or her dreams of becoming a pianist will disappear. Like, that's all you need. I think, again, just be mindful of tone. Again, this is, I don't know what age Nora is, but since this is I'm assuming she's at least, 18 or younger, being told by a man that she will never come out of the L train is incredibly threatening and an immediate tone shift. It might be accurate to the events of the book, but, just be mindful that in a pitch, what we're seeing is a grown man telling a young girl child that she'll never come out of the train, which really recasts things immediately. And then I just, we need more detail. We need more information. That second paragraph is confusing to me. I don't know what a world where alive is New York City. As Tom said to me, that indicates a missing word to me. I think it might just be kind of funky phrasing, but it's a little too confusing. You're relying on the audience understanding that Natanem is a backwards Manhattan and kind of inferring context from that, which most readers will probably be able to do, but some will not, and that will be deeply confusing to them. So even saying a treacherous race through Natanem, a backwards Manhattan where X is Y and A is B or something, that would be interesting color and provide helpful context. Do either of you know, is 88 wooden ones, is that the number of keys on a piano? Is that a reference to, okay, so that's what I gathered, but I did not know that information, and so 88 wooden ones was confusing to me just because it requires that kind of pub trivia level of knowledge about a piano. So I think shorten that first paragraph, give us a lot more context about what this backwards New York City is, and again, what's at stake. Because I think, to Tom's point, we don't really get that here, because the lesson that she learns in the last sentence is the same thing that she already knows in the first sentence. So we need those stakes to be present, clearer, and more and stronger.
And I was just going to add, I mean, any agent or editor who's getting a lot of submissions, you're going to be reading these quickly. So if your submission and if your pitch isn't clear, then you're off to a bad start, and they may not even, read on. You've got this one shot, so you need to make it as, strong, and as, that clarity is crucial in getting across what the book is about, I think.
All right. And I think this is sort of an indication of the unfair apples and oranges nature of this category we picked. But here's our second one, John, if you'd be so kind.
Sure. I can already tell what you're getting at from the title. Here we have Bear Friends Forever by Lori Benatti. Two things are ruining fourth grade for Indy Pizzarelli: reading and Billy Webster. Not only does Indy believe she's the worst reader in the history of Clarion Elementary, but Billy won't stop teasing her. She's having a terrible year until she discovers a lost bear cub and teaches him to communicate with humans. While working with the bear, and with animal behaviorist Dr. Nkosi, Indy's creative thinking leads to a research study and an appearance on TV. She learns to stand up to Billy, too, but can she stand up to a bigger bully who's threatening the bear's forest? I like this. I think it's cute. I think you get, again, clear sense of tone and stakes and voice from, just that first sentence. Two things are ruining fourth grade for Indy Pizzarelli: reading and Billy Webster. Great. Like, we immediately know, we have so much context from that. We have a sense of character. We have a sense of stakes. We have a sense of, the landscape on the ground. That's wonderful. I think, again, it feels like we're speeding through things a little bit. In the span of one sentence, she both discovers the lost bear cub and teaches him to communicate with humans, which I'm assuming would be a rather labor intensive and difficult endeavor. So I would love to kind of draw that out a little bit and build that into a couple of sentences about how she goes about teaching him to communicate with humans. I also think that the end of the pitch feels a little dissonant with the stakes that are set up in the beginning. When we're introduced to a fourth grader whose two biggest concerns are that she's having difficulty reading and there's a school bully, all of a sudden pivoting to she's involved in a research study feels a little bit like we're going from 0 to 100. So, and then we have the research study, but then we pivot back to, standing up to bullies. So I think just keeping in mind the overall tone and the kind of age group that we're talking about, I think even for me, removing research study and just saying her creative thinking leads to an appearance on TV, eventually, through XYZ, whatever, she learns to stand up to Billy, and then including bigger bully threatening the bear's forest. I think it's very nearly there, but there's just a couple of moments of those kind of dissonance that I would like smoothed out for it to be, gold star.
Yeah, I really like this as well. I think the tone is right. I think the title is really clever. I think that's good, and that opening sentence, as John says, I think is brilliant. Actually, that really sums up, the scenario that this protagonist is facing. So much so, actually, I'm not sure that you necessarily need that second sentence. I think in that second sentence, it essentially repeats what we've learned in the first sentence. So you could probably take that out in its entirety and get straight on to the rest of the pitch and use those words more productively elsewhere. I'd agree with what John says. I suppose, having had that detail about Billy Webster at the start, at the end of the pitch, it's not the most important thing. So actually, she learns to stand up to Billy too, but can she stand up to a bigger bully who's threatening the bear's forest? So there, the stakes have kind of shifted. Having having had it at the beginning where she needs to deal with Billy Webster and sort herself out in class, it's then the stakes have raised to something else. So personally, I would spin that back round, to what you have at the start. So she's got the stuff, she's dealing with the stuff in the forest, but then actually, can she deal with Billy? And rather than that being resolved, where she learns to stand up to Billy too, I think that should be more treated like a question. Can she now stand up to Billy? With the bear's help. So rather than it being a foregone conclusion, keep that open and up in the air. But I think it's a really nice pitch. And obviously, as you were saying, it's a different audience than from the other. The other pitch for the other children's book, but I think actually the author handles it kind of really, really well, and I think this is a really nice. It's sweet. I think is what I say. It's a sweet pitch, and I think the title's good, and the basic idea is really, really strong.
So
I'd add to briefly that this is a prime example of why it's great to include names in your pitches, because Indy Pizzarelli gives us so much in this pitch in terms of character, tone, and what we're going to get from the book, that we get so much information just from the name Indy Pizzarelli. So this is a great example of why just dropping a name in is really helpful.
Great. So I think I get a sense of where this one might be going. John, do you want to vote between The Wonderfield Nora Minlay or Bear Friends Forever?
Bear Friends Forever.
Tom?
Yeah, I'm friends with the bears as well, I think.
Forever Bears. That goes on to the next round. And let's now take it to our next one here, which is Mystery, Crime, and Thriller, which I think is also a fairly broad category. But yes, let's hit this one up. Let's switch it around. John, would you mind taking the first one here?
I'm shocked. Here we have A Generous Contribution by Sharon Luo. A thriller that takes place in the sordid underbelly of society. Lily's son is a contract killer who works for the Clinic, a clandestine organization that targets the world's most corrupt and depraved criminals. However, I was just digesting that information. However, the Clinic's missions go beyond simple assassinations. Their recruits harvest the organs of each target, supplying them to hospitals and black market buyers. To get to the person who took everything from her, Lily must endure dangerous assignments while navigating her own sense of justice, the moral ambiguities of her profession, and the price of survival in a world where she cannot fully trust anyone. I'd like this. I like how it turns things on its head. I like how our heroine is a contract killer who is targeting bad people, and then all we know is that they're harvesting the organs. The context line of hospitals implies that these organs are being used for good purposes. Although I think that black market buyers complicates things, and I might just strike black market buyers from the pitch, because even if it's true, I think that it muddies the situation in a way that I think if you just keep it as like the Clinic is killing bad people for good reasons, I think that's simpler. Just keep it even, and you can complicate it when you have more time and space in the manuscript. I think we need a little more clarity and a little more information to get to the person who took everything from her. Who is he? Why did he take everything from her? What did he take? That's a little unclear to me in a way where I think the clarity would help the overall pitch. I think I'd like a little more information about, how Lily plans to get to him, and what she has to do to get to him. For example, if he's a random bad guy and she's just using the Clinic's resources to find him and get to him and kill him, that's a different book than if this person is the head of the Clinic, and she's working for the Clinic to kind of work their way up their ranks and get to him. So I think that providing more information about him provides a clearer sense of what the book is and how it's going to unfold. But I think this is really strong. I love how it takes the pitch and turns it on its head. And again, just speaking to the power of names, I think even the brightness and the lightness of having a contract killer named Lily Sun is a great detail that just kind of keeps us on our toes and speaks to that kind of dissonance that you're setting up in this world. So really good.
Yeah, there's a lot in here. I think again, actually, I think the first half is better than the second for me. I think at the beginning I would go straight in with the protagonist. So that opening bit, a thriller that takes place in the sordid underbelly of society. I don't think we need that detail. That feels superfluous to me. I'd go straight in and say Lily's son is the contract killer. Is a contract killer. I don't think you need to say who works. Again, I think that's extraneous. So you could just go straight in and say Lily's son is a contract killer for the Clinic, a clandestine organisation that targets the world's most corrupt and depraved criminals. And then bang, you're straight in there with a summary of who she is and who she works for. I was interested about, I don't know, I sort of paused on the phrase corrupt and depraved criminals. I mean, as opposed to nice criminals or kind of friendly or less depraved criminals. Why are we having that detail there? I thought that middle sentence where it talks about harvesting the organs did feel quite dark to me. And then I was, in terms of my empathy and sympathy for Lily as the protagonist, I sort of paused slightly. There's something slightly, I don't know, not ghoulish, but if she's killing people and after she's killed them, then is she taking their organs as well? And she goes off. And as John says, the fact that goes to black market buyers rather than being for good kind of muddies the water a little bit. Then having had the scenario that's set up in that first bit, we only really get to the story at that point to get to the person who took everything from her. And then we're into the actual kind of structure of the story itself. And it's unclear from how it's written here how that detail fits in with her job at the clinic. They almost feel like kind of two separate things. So finding a way to marry that up and make sure that the initial scenario matches up with the story that follows, I think is really important. And then I think here it gets a little bit general for me. To get to the person who took everything from her. Dangerous assignments, moral ambiguities, price of survival in a world where she cannot fully trust anyone. That to me needs a bit more specifics in there. And as I say, if that can be linked up more clearly with the first half, I think this could be really strong. I think the basic idea, the premise is really, really good, but it needs a bit of tightening and a bit of editing to really bring the idea out.
Cool. Do you want to see the next one? Tom, if you'd like to read this one out.
What are we?
Yeah.
Okay, this is called Made for Murder, a Deadly Check-In. And it goes like this. Bethany Gertz had mad recall skills but sucks at reading people. Wrongly convicted of a crime, her dreams of becoming a homicide detective like her beloved Gramps are as dead as the body in the bed at the swank hotel where she works. Enter Detective Dan Davis, who's hiding a secret. As the murder escalates and Bethany's life is in danger, her sleuthing skills are put to the test. And when Gramps describes an old case, Bethany sees vital clues about the current murders and her own family. Can she unmask and outwit the killer when they're all at risk? I like this. I think it's not as dark as the previous example. It feels, if not kind of cozy crime, it feels more kind of conventional, kind of detective-y kind of story. I think that sort of inciting incident needs to be brought out a little bit more. I mean, in that second sentence, wrongly convicted of a crime, her dreams of becoming a homicide detective, like her beloved Gramps, are as dead as the body in the bed at the Swank Hotel where she works. I mean, as I'm saying that feels a bit of a mouthful to say. I think there's a lot of information for the reader to take in. I think what's particularly confusing is dropping in this detail about how she's been wrongly convicted of a crime, and then we have the body and the murder. So I think initially you're almost thinking, well, has she been accused of this crime, or is that something else? So I think a little bit of unpacking there needs to be done. I would bring that story and that inciting incident out a little bit more fully. But I like how the other characters introduced, how it comes back to her kind of grandpa, and then there are the stakes raised in terms of risks to her family as well. So I think in terms of the structure of it, it works very well. And possibly again, I'm not sure on that opening sentence. I'm not sure that's where I would begin myself, but I think it's got a nice tone and feel and voice. And if you bring that, that initial murder out, the actual structure of how the story develops and how it's linked to her family and stuff is neatly done.
Yeah, I agree about tone and voice and all of that. I think the first sentence is very good at establishing that voice. Mad recall skills, sucks at reading people. Even referring to him as Gramps just gives us a sense of who Bethany is and kind of what the voice in the page is going to be like. I think I've been really impressed so far in general about how all of these submissions capture that tone and really convey what the character would read like in a full manuscript. I think that's really difficult to do, and I've been hugely impressed by everyone who's managed to do it. I think, getting into the weeds of it, that middle sentence, enter Detective Dan Davis, who's hiding a secret, is a nothing burger. Detective Dan Davis does not come up anywhere else in the manuscript, and we have zero context for what the secret is or how it impacts the rest of the novel. I mean, his secret is such a vague term that it could be referring to the fact that he dyes his hair and is embarrassed about it, or he has something to do with the murder. I mean, that could go in so many different directions that it's so general as to be unhelpful to the overall pitch. And like I said, even just because he appears in that one sentence, it's unclear how he affects the overall book. So I would either build him out or just cut him out entirely, because I think that you don't really need him in establishing the rest of the pitch. I also think that the pitch would be stronger if you switched not the very last two sentences, but the second to last and the third to last sentence, because I think it would read better if you say, when Gramps describes an old case, Bethany sees vital clues about the current murders in her own family. As the murder escalates and Bethany's life is in danger, her sleuthing skills are put to the test. Can she unmask and outwit the killer when they're all at risk? I think it reads slightly out of order because you talk about Bethany testing her sleuthing skills before she sees the clues about the murders in her family. And I think that it would just read better to me if the clues kind of triggers the sleuthing skills being put to test. But otherwise, I think this is fun. It's a good pitch. Again, character, voice, plot, stakes are all clear. I think there's some muddiness that needs cleared up, but once that's out of the way, it's really strong.
All right, so between these two, a generous contribution or made for murder? Tom, what's your vote?
That's quite a hard one, actually. I think I'm going to go for a generous contribution because I think the idea feels more original and different. So although the pitch needs a bit more work, I think that's got the greater potential to be something interesting. So I'm going to go for that.
John?
I'm also torn. I think a dangerous contribution to me is I'm more intrigued by that pitch, but in terms of the craft of it, I think that the Made for Murder was a better pitch. So I'm kind of torn. I don't want to be the one to make this decision, so I'm going to vote Made for Murder and force Martin to.
The thing is, yeah, I do like them for very different reasons, and the reason that Made for Murder stood out, it just felt like the voice of the character is something I hadn't necessarily seen in that sort of cozy space or mystery space. So for that reason, Made for Murder is going through to the next round. Ultimate power.
It was a really tough one. I would pick up both books.
All right. Okay, at the midway point, I'll give you guys a quick break as we take, just a moment or so to hear from our sponsors. Today's Pitch Wars is brought to you by Reedsy Learning. Turn the summer into your season of success by signing up to Reedsy's How to Write a Novel course. Join the students in our July session as you're guided through the craft of novel writing by instructor Tom Bromley, an author, best-selling ghostwriter, and esteemed judge for Reedsy's Pitch Wars. Over 15 weeks, you will learn and hone all the skills you need to write the best novel you can, while receiving the structure and support you need to finish your first draft. You'll get access to 5 new film quality video lessons from Tom each week, insights from our author speak every weekend, live masterclasses every Monday, student forums and feedback every Friday, and exclusive book coaching breaks for all the added support you need. When you enroll to this course, you'll be able to watch all your lessons whenever you like, forever, and you can continue to access our live weekly masterclasses for a whole year. Viewers of Pitch Wars can get a 20% discount until this Friday by using Pitch24 at checkout. Promo code in the description just below. And we're back. All right. Some casual promotion there, and we are now on to our memoir and non-fiction section. John, would you do the honors for this first one?
Sure. The Other Emily Blunt by Erica Bolin. There is another Emily Blunt, and this one worked the other end of Hollywood as a journalist. Read about extraordinary life adventures, including touring with The Clash, covering Hollywood's biggest red carpet premieres, interviewing stars for film openings, writing cover stories for magazines like Elle Canada and under her real name, producing DVD bonus features, and helping to plan The Godfather of Soul, James Brown's final memorials. The celeb journalist Erica Bolin, who worked under the nom de plume Emily Blunt from 1990 to 2017, shares insider stories from her years as an entertainment writer. I think I'm kind of torn. I like the not, it's not really a twist, but the kind of attention grabbing hook that's being used in the first sentence. At the same time, Emily Blunt is not the rarest name. It's not like a once and like, oh my god, there's only one. Like, Emily is a fairly common first name. I think Blunt is a fairly common last name. And so the hook of saying I am also named Emily Blunt, but I have a career that is different from the actress Emily Blunt is not really doing the heavy lifting that you want it to, or that you think it is. For example, if there was I have a more unique name, but setting that aside, if somebody approached me and said, "Hi, my name is also John Darga, and I have a different career than you," that would not necessarily blow my mind. I think I'd be more interested if there was another John Darga and he had the same career as me. So that kind of felt a little bit like a nothing burger to me. I think there are interesting allusions to stories here, but not the stories themselves. So I think, as Tom and I kind of mentioned at the very beginning of this, we're looking for specificity, and you're being specific here, but there's another layer deeper that you could go. So, for example, you talk about touring with The Clash. What's the layer beneath that? The time that I got drunk on tequila shots with The Clash at a dive bar in Las Vegas. Interviewing stars for film openings. What's the layer beneath that? The time that I asked Natalie Portman a question that she found so offensive she walked away in mid-interview. Writing cover stories for magazines like Elle Canada. Again, I mean, you get the point that I'm making here, but you're mentioning specific stories, but they're still too general to be interesting and appealing, and you kind of have to go that layer deeper and talk about the layer of specificity underneath the layer that you're mentioning here. And I think you can do that for pretty much every single one of the stories that you mentioned. I also, that's a run-on sentence in the second paragraph, and it should be broken up into a few sentences, I think. I think that I'm left at the end of this wondering why we care, because the stories themselves are still read a little too generic, and again, the kind of Emily Blunt same name thing does not show me why I should care about this. And I think the hurdle that you have to face with Memoir is that unless you're, an Angelina Jolie or a huge celebrity name, to the average reader, you are an average person. You are a peer to them. And so you need to convince the average person who walks into a bookstore that they should pay $30 for a book written by someone they see as another average person just like them. And that is a difficult battle to fight. And so you need to, put as many arrows in your quiver for that battle as you can. And that just means really hitting them over the head with as many unique, wonderful stories as you can, where they'll read that and go, wow, I have to know that story. And I don't get that sense here.
Yeah, there's a comment in the chat I'm just looking from Unintentional Smile, who says, "Do memoirs need plots or stakes?" And yes, I think they do. So I would say here that sentence at the end, the celeb journalist Eric Bolin, da 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 da, that almost should go at the beginning. That sort of repeats a little bit of what's at the top. So you set you set the scene out at the top. The middle of it is then the meat of all these different amazing things that she's done. But what it needs is a narrative or a story there. Otherwise, you're just having a series of slightly unconnected anecdotes, as interesting as those anecdotes might be. So the question is, what has the author learnt over her time being a journalist in Hollywood? How has this experience changed her? What's the deeper personal journey underneath? I mean, I was thinking about a book like Toby Young, which was called How to Lose Friends and
Alienate People.
Alienate People, which was a book about him turning up in New York and working in American media, having been a sort of big journalist in the UK, and then just flopping badly in the States, and then coming back again. And in that one, you've got the anecdotes, which are funny, but you've got his story of like an Englishman abroad, and then how he grows and develops and changes as a person. So I think this needs a little bit more of that. I think the subject matter is potentially really, really fascinating. All those little anecdotes I'd like to read, but what is the narrative that's going to stitch it together, and why are we going to care about this journalist and her time in Hollywood specifically?
Okay, and the next one we have here, Tom, this is again memoir and non-fiction, so this probably falls closer to the non-fiction side.
Yeah, I thought you might make me read the Italian. I apologise. I don't. Yeah, my Italian is non-existent, so I apologise for any bad pronunciations here. Magia e Parla. Learn Italian through cooking. Immerse yourself in Mangia a Parla. Master Italian through cooking, the ultimate fusion of language learning and culinary delight. Each tantalising recipe, from creamy risotto to zesty marinara, doubles as a comprehensive Italian lesson. That's what I need. Learn beyond words and phrases, grasp grammar, idioms, and cultural nuances with every bite. Engage in fun, practical exercises tied to each recipe, enhancing both your cooking skills and Italian fluency. With step-by-step instructions, stunning visuals, and interactive language exercises, Magia and Parla transforms your kitchen into an Italian oasis, perfect for food lovers and language learners eager for a flavourful educational adventure. Buon appetito e buona fortuna. I think I probably need this book myself. It's an interesting idea. I mean, this is a pitch that's all about the idea and the concept, and it's an interesting idea of teaching a language through cooking. With my editorial hat on, when I was an editor, one of my questions always is, where would this sit in the bookshop? And I think the danger with books commercially sometimes is where they fall between the two stools. So if someone's going into the bookshop to buy this, are they going to the cookery section or are they going into the languages section? And here I think it's not completely clear which way around it is. Do I want to learn how to cook Italian? Do I want to learn how to speak Italian? It needs to be more specifically one thing or the other. And I think if you'll pardon the pun, I think the proof of this would be in the pudding. I would have to see an example recipe or two to understand how much you're going to pick up from the Italian language through doing the cooking. And my concern is that if my Italian isn't particularly good, am I going to make some horrendously dangerous recipes that are going to give me food poisoning because I don't understand what's on the page? So I think it's an interesting idea as a concept, but I think you'd have to see a couple of recipes to see how it works. And I think being clearer exactly what the audience is, rather than thinking this is going to get two audiences, you never do. It's got to be one or the other. So decide what that is, and then shape the proposal and the pitch more obviously around that.
Yeah, I think this is a very intriguing pitch. I'm trying to separate, because I know this is a pitch contest. We're judging the pitches, but it's hard to separate this one from the execution, because I'm very intrigued by the pitch, but I'm having a lot of difficulty envisioning how this comes through in the execution. It says that you can master Italian through cooking. It seems to me that a book like this, you would probably master a lot of cooking and kitchen related vocabulary, but not much else. Like I'm very confused is one word, curious is another word, intrigued is another. Pick your poison. But I'm very curious to see how or if other vocabulary sets are included within this cookbook, because as we all, I'm sure most of us have taken some form of second language course throughout our lives. There is shopping, there's business, there's greeting, there's casual conversation, and I just don't clearly see how um how you could fit those vocabulary. And like there's master account, there's like grammar, there's pluperfect, there's passive voice, there's active voice, there's past tense, there's future tense. How are you going to convey those lessons and those languages and that vocabulary through, and like verb conjugation through cooking? I think it's a great pitch and a great concept. I'm just not convinced this idea will hold together on the page. So again, I know we're just judging the pitches, but that's a big kind of umbrella that I'm confused about. Other than that, I think what this is really missing is the author's expertise, background, and platform. We don't know anything about Riccardo Costa from this pitch, and I think that's really important. Is he Italian? Are these recipes from Nona's Kitchen? Has he worked in a restaurant for 30 years? Because my interest in buying a learn Italian through cooking book is going to be different for I'm an 80-year-old Italian man who has been running a restaurant in Rome for the last 50 years versus a guy that lives in New Jersey and likes to visit Olive Garden. So I think that background as to who the author is going to be hugely important contextually for a pitch like this.
Okay, so judgment time. Is it going to be the other Emily Blunt, Mangia e Parla, or I'm going to throw in a wild card here, 10 years down the drain from the beginning is also on the table. So, if you had to pick one of them, this could also really mess up our scoring system if it ends up in a three-way tie.
Yeah.
Tom, do you have a preference from those?
I'd go for the plumber. Actually, out of the three of them, I think there's questions over the if you can teach Italian through cooking. I think there's a definite question there. I think the Emily Blunt needs work, but there's an interesting idea in there for sure. But the plumbing idea felt the most original of the three. So if I was still a commissioning editor, out of those three proposals coming on my desk, that's the one I would pick up first.
I would actually agree. I have too many questions about Mangia Parla and the other Emily Blunt, and I'm most intrigued to read more of the Plumber memoir. But I will say that if we had to choose between these two, I'd probably go with Mangia Parla because I think it was a more effective pitch. But throwing the Plumber memoir in, I agree. I think that's my favorite.
Awesome. This is it reminds me of when I was like 10 years old. I was running for house captain, unopposed, and the teachers told everyone to write someone else's name in there. So I came second. But this is but I think so. Yeah, reading again Guy Venner's pitch for 10 Years Down a Drain. Yeah, really stood out. So wild card coming in for the clutch, according to Rollo. Let's quickly move on to the next one. I see that it's past the hour. If you're both okay sticking on for a while, we'll try to get through these ones.
Yep.
Starting with, let's start with you, Tom, on this one here. Is science fiction and fantasy.
Okay, so this is a book called Go by Emily Childs. An ex-convict who unwittingly underwent rehabilitation surgery to rewire his brain to abolish criminal behaviour discovers he was falsely accused of his crime and has to figure out who he really is in the face of society branding him a villain. He yearns to be a productive community member while adapting to a changed world that forgot him. He is plagued with isolation as he navigates new technology and strange social expectations. A friend from the past knows the truth and is determined to help Gabriel understand if he is a success story or a cautionary tale. Okay, I think even as I was reading it, you can probably hear that that first sentence is too long, and that there's too much in there, and that needs unpacking. He's undergone rehabilitation surgery to rewire his brain. He's falsely accused of his crime and has to figure out who he really is in the face of society branding him a villain. So there, immediately, if I was reading this as an editor, I'm slightly confused about what is going on. So clarity is needed there. As we've talked about all evening, I think the names are important. We learn that this guy is called Gabriel in the last sentence. Up to then, it's an ex-convict. He's then he. So that needs changing in there, I would say as well. I would, just as an editing point, to have two sentences in succession, beginning with the same word. He yearns, he is plagued, feels as though that needs editing. That, to me, as an editor, would feel kind of slightly kind of lazy writing, or just needs kind of tightening up. And then the other thing I would say is in that final sentence, a friend from the past knows the truth and is determined to help Gabriel. At that point, it's the friend from the past who feels as though they are the person doing the stuff and running the plot, and Gabriel is a kind of sideshow. So at that point, I'm thinking, well, hang on, who is the main protagonist in the story here? So I think there's probably a lot of ideas in here in the mix, but it needs more shape and more clarity to really make clear what this story is about.
Yeah, this is it's just a little muddy to me. I like, he yearns to be a productive community member while adapting to a changed world that forgot him. I'm guessing that I think what would help me, first of all, is more context about how long he was behind bars, how long he was in prison, because that then provides flavor for a changed world. Like, it appears that he's been in prison for a very long time. If this is new rehabilitation surgery, I am kind of confused a little bit about the fact that society is branding him a villain, and that's a problem. I understand, obviously, if he's been in prison for a long time, why he would be branded a villain by society. But the concept of literally having invasive brain surgery to rewire your brain so that you're not a criminal anymore. I mean, I understand there are nuances and that society is fucked, and that people would probably still see him as a criminal even after this rewiring brain surgery. But just in terms of like the distillation of the pitch, those two things ring dissonant chords for me. Isolation navigates. Yeah. So again, like the new, I think just more context about how long he's been in prison and what his crime was would really help me provide clarity and context for the rest of the paragraph. Because again, navigating new technology and strange social expectations, really, really, really heavily implies that he has been in prison for at least a decade, if not longer, and that technology has significantly eclipsed where it was when he went into prison. So I think giving a length of his prison stay, I think telling us what the year is, even like he was imprisoned in 2024 and now it's 2070, that would help us out. Again, the capacity of his crime. I think that if he's an ex-convict who's in prison for murdering a child, is going to flavor our understanding of him and his rehabilitation more than if he is a Jean Valjean character who stole a loaf of bread to feed his family. So I think, and then again, just like the falsely accused of his crime, like how does he discover that? Why, if he has in fact been in prison for 20, 30 years, that's kind of implied to the rest of this, why is he only discovering that he was falsely accused now? Why is that not something that has come up before over the course of his 30 years in prison? So it's a good pitch, it's an intriguing pitch, but I have a lot of questions that kind of muddy the water for me, that I think could be pretty handily answered by just providing like some more specific context in the first sentence or two.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, I think that date's really important. I think when you're writing a pitch that's science fiction or fantasy, a little bit of world building, just grounding the reader so we know when and where we are, I think is really really useful. So to have that in there, I think is key. I would say. And I saw a couple of people in the chat saying as well, asking about the title, and that was something else I wondered about as well. What the link was
Yeah.
between the title and then what we're reading in the pitch. That connection there wasn't immediately apparent.
Cool. People have been asking. I think folks are sort of questioning: are these the very best pitches that were sent in? And I guess it is a tough thing to say because I did read through all 1,500, and I think I made myself a little shortlist for each one, and basically went through, and the ones that stuck in my head tended to be the ones that got picked. So something in me reading it the first time, if anything sort of lodged in there, that tended to be the one that I ended up going for. Like there were a lot of ones which I'm pretty sure be better books maybe, but yeah, if it just didn't stick out from the hundreds and hundreds of other ones being sent in, then it was likely to get forgotten. Okay, so there's a second one here. I think John, if you could read this one.
So, Echoes of Oblivion by Philip Lee. In a society where memories are currency, Mia stumbles upon a clandestine market selling forgotten recollections. When her own memories are stolen, she's thrust into a perilous game. With a mysterious companion, Mia embarks on a journey to reclaim her past. Yet in a world built on forgetting, each step towards truth risks her very identity. Forgotten Echoes, a captivating saga of memory, identity, and the profound impact of remembrance. Their identity. I'm still parsing it a little bit. I love the world building that's been done here already. I love the concept of a clandestine market selling. I would choose a different word than forgotten because it's like I think the proper word is like stolen, right? If it's a clandestine market, I think that the recollections are forgotten because they've been taken from the memory holder's head, and so forgotten is not the best word to use there. I would say something more specific about why these memories were forgotten, basically. I think I would make more of Mia's stolen memories and what she loses from her memories being stolen. Like what, and I guess that I'm getting too into like philosophical weeds about it. It was like, how does she know what she loses when they're stolen if she has no memory of them? That's for the author to figure out in the manuscript. But it's just not clear to me what she loses aside from the memories, and how that changes her, and aside from the obviously violating principle of having your memories stolen, why she needs these memories back. What do they add to her life that she doesn't have, without these memories? And again, I just think a little more forecasting in terms of stakes. It's a bit of a cliche, but I love she will face XYZ list that just kind of gives us that real snapshot view of everything that she's going to have to traverse through, that's going to challenge her as she claims these memories back. I'd like to know, if she's going to travel the world, if she's going to confront a serial killer, if she's going to topple a regime, just kind of getting a sense of the scope of where her journey will take her, would be useful for me. But the good news is that this is a pretty short pitch. And I think based on the word count and the character count of the other pitches, that there is certainly room to add 2 or 3 more sentences of context here. So that would be my note, is I think it's a really solid foundation. But, again, I need more specifics. I need more context. I need more forecasting. I need more stakes for it to really be a gold star pitch for me.
Yeah, I'd echo. Sorry, pardon the fun. I'd echo that a lot of what John was saying. One thing I noticed immediately is that the title is different to the title in the pitch. I mean, it's a small detail, so it's Echoes of
Oh,
Oblivion
right. Catch that.
in the header,
Yeah.
and it's Forgotten Echoes down there. And so I guess if I was an editor looking at this, that would immediately say to me that this author hasn't gone through the material as thoroughly as they should have done. I think it's a really, really interesting idea. I think that opening sentence in particular is really strong. I think then it's, as John says, I mean, I would get rid of that last line about the captivating saga of memory, identity, and the profound impact of remembrance, which I think is all embedded in what we've got earlier, and use those extra words to flesh the story out more than there is already. And in particular, it's that link between the first and the second sentence. So Mia seems to find this clandestine market of selling forgotten recollections, but then that phrase, when her own memory is stolen, which suggests that actually that happens later on. It doesn't happen straight away. So how do those two sentences link up? How does that story and connection work? And then I think phrases like, thrust into a perilous game is very general, not quite sure what's going on there. Each step towards truth risks the very identity. And just tightening up the world. I mentioned world building a moment ago. So that opening sentence says, in a society where memory is a currency, and then further down it says, in a world built on forgetting. And that to me seems the opposite, actually, or it just needs explaining what the connection between the two is. But I think as an idea, as a concept, I think this is really strong. I would just get the author to take out that last sentence and spend some extra words, John says, bringing the story and plot out a bit more. But I think this is really intriguing.
Another aspect of the specificity that this would benefit from that I forgot to mention when I was speaking was mysterious companion. That gives us absolutely nothing.
He's mysterious.
And a companion.
Just in case you were worried that Mia had no friends and perhaps they were too transparent, don't you worry. All right.
I hope Mia can remember who he is, or who they are, I should say. We don't know.
All right. So between the two Go and Echoes of Oblivion, Tom, do you have a preference?
Echoes of Oblivion for me.
John?
In terms of the pitch that made me want to read the manuscript most, Echoes of Oblivion for me.
All right. There we go. We're now on to our very last category of the evening. Thank you for sticking around, everyone. Remember to give this a thumbs up if you've been enjoying this. Last one, though, is romance. Okay, let's start, John, with this one here.
Let's go. I Blame the Edit by Jessica Liese. This enemies to lovers second chance romantic comedy offers a hilarious peek behind the reality TV curtain. It's been 14 years since Rachel's heart was shattered by a grade A douchebag in front of millions of viewers. She now hosts a popular podcast analyzing the show that made her famous. Midway through the show's 30th season, it's yanked from the air. That same week, a hurricane, geez, that's a real tone switch. A hurricane flattens her family's home, and the guy who dumped her becomes her neighbor. Wow, a lot happens in that one sentence. To save her career and help her family, Rachel must recruit him to revisit every painful moment of their shared past. Great burger meat in between subpar buns. Doesn't need that first. I understand that in a romance, it's very effective to immediately state, what kind of romance it is. I don't think we need that because Tom said about an earlier pitch, the first sentence says enemies to lovers, second chance romantic comedy. Second sentence tells us it's been 14 years since Rachel's heart was shattered by a grade A douchebag. That gives us enemies to lovers and second chance. That tells us all we need to know. So strike that first line. Great middle. And then again, I think that last sentence doesn't tell us enough. Why does her career need saving? I understand that her podcast is linked to this popular show that has just been canceled. But theoretically, if she's had a very popular podcast, she can pivot to other things. Help her family, I understand. Why does Rachel need to recruit him? Why do they need to revisit every painful moment of their shared past? What is this shared project that they're working on together? Why does she need him to do it? I just need a lot more, again, a lot more details, a lot more context, a lot more specificity for everything that you're sharing in that last sentence. Otherwise, tone is good. It fits pretty squarely in the genre. I like the reality TV kind of, hook that's eternally popular, and does pretty well in the market. As I kind of commented on, I think that having, like, it just feels like two very different things of different significance smushed right together in the same sentence with a semicolon. It's a real abrupt tone shift to go from the TV show being canceled to a hurricane flattening her family's home. And I might try and soften that transition a little bit. Even if it kind of means, like, the way that I might edit that is toning, is making less of the show's cancellation and saying something like midway, or saying something like you know uh, Rachel has the worst week of her life. She loses her job at the same time that a hurricane flattens her family's home, and just kind of like make it more simpatico in that sense. Also, why is the guy who dumped her becoming her neighbor? Why does he move there? Does the hurricane force him to move? Do they move next to him? More context there. So good concept, good voice, good middle section. Strike the first line, build out that last line to give us more context about how the book is propelled forward.
Yeah, I think as the song goes, that there are more questions than answers here. So I when I was looking at that, I just kept on writing why, as I was going through it. I think the main thing for me is, if this is meant to be a romance book, the romance feels secondary to what is going on. So actually, if you look at that last sentence, to save her career and help her family, Rachel must recruit him to revisit every painful moment of their shared past. It doesn't sound a romantic story at its heart. It's a story about other things. And in a similar way, in that opening sentence, it's the romantic comedy is kind of shoveled to the side, and this is more about being a hilarious peek behind a reality TV curtain. So I would say, if this is a romance book, the romance and the relationship needs to be more front and center in the mix. So I'd agree with John. I would take out that opening sentence, and in fact, that description, enemies to lovers, second chance romantic comedy, immediately feels a little bit generic to me in terms of the story and the plot. So I wouldn't do that, because if you take that out, then the story itself is quite interesting. There's a good premise there. I'd have to read it, but I'm not sure you necessarily need the hurricane. I think there's almost too much going on there at the same time. As John says, tonally, it makes a shift. So I would probably, it's enough there that the week that this program is cancelled, this guy who dumped her becomes her neighbour. And those two things are linked, and then you've got this tension there. So whether you've had the hurricane earlier on, and there's a little bit of stuff in the background, but make it more about the relationship between these two central characters, I think that's key for me.
Okay, cool. We have our second one here and our very final entry of the evening. Tom, if you care to take this one.
This is called Thea's Flamingos by Colleen Goff. Newly redundant, a veterinarian, Thea, goes in search of Australia's lost flamingos and finds herself. Australia was once full of flamingos. Climate change drove them away millions of years ago. Could climate change have brought them back? An old flame seeks Thea's help to save swamplands in Queensland, where he's seen flamingos. Thea drives north to investigate, and on her journey confronts natural disasters and ghosts from her past. Ultimately, she finds the courage to love again and discovers an unexpected way to save the swamplands. A quirky, poignant tale of love the second time around, and the magic of flamingos. I think this is really nice. I think that initial premise with that concept of the flamingos as the symbolic element, that sort of climate changey theme, I really like. I think kind of as a more general point, There's probably not enough books out there that use kind of climate change in their stories, and I think that's a real gap in the market for people to kind of include those in the mix. I think it needs a little bit more tightening in terms of the kind of the structure and the story. It feels a little bit bitty in the way we go. So we have this kind of summary at the start, summary at the end, this question about flamingos in the middle, and it's only in that sort of third, slightly longer paragraph that we get the kind of the meat of the plot. And again, perhaps we need to have a little bit more about the story in there, and a little bit more about the central relationship. We've got the ghosts from the past, finding the courage to love again, discovering an unexpected way to save the swamplands. That's all really interesting, but that just needs to be unpacked a little bit further. But I think for me, this feels different and distinctive, and with a bit more shaping, I think this could be really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good, the uniqueness of the flamingo pitch is makes it stand out immediately. I think it also uses the flamingos to talk about a larger topical issue like climate change. That's really nice. I think the author here has slightly confused pitch and tagline, because the first sentence and the last sentence are both taglines, which are separate from the pitch and should just be, I mean, they have their purpose, but they should be removed from the pitch entirely because they're separate things that aren't really included in this form. So strike the first and last lines and then use that space. I think kind of to what Tom was saying, that, again, we move really quickly. Thea drives north to investigate, and on her journey confronts natural disasters and ghosts from her past. And then we jump immediately to, ultimately, she finds the courage to love again. Like, use that extra space to tell us about her journey. Also, I'm a little confused if this old flame is on the journey with her, or if it sounds from this pitch like she's making the journey on her own, in which case that makes it a little, not thornier, but it makes it more complicated for a romance book. So I would just give more details about that journey, what she encounters, who's with her. Again, I've said it before, but that kind of like XY along her way, she will XYZ. What you kind of do, I guess, with the confront natural disasters and ghosts from her past. But ghosts from her past, those both read vague to me. I want to know what the natural disasters are and what the ghosts from her past are, I guess. I just want more specificity and more detail from it, because I can't envision in my head what that journey is like. And I want to see it more. I'm sorry. I now note that we've been talking for the last 90 minutes, and I can feel that the words have started to leave my brain with much more. So I'm aware that the quality of the critique has declined for the last few, and I both apologize and rather defensively say I'd like to see you speak as eloquently 90 minutes in as you did at the beginning. Also, my other note is I think you need to find some synonyms for flamingo. I'm seeing the word flamingo too much in this pitch, and it got to the point where it's to lose meaning by the end of the pitch. I think striking those first two sentences will help, but even like a kind of clunky workaround, like saying where he's seen the iconic pink birds or something. Like, it's a little clunky, but I personally would rather have that than like feel like the word flamingo is not a real word by the end of the pitch about flamingos.
Okay, so for our last bit of voting here, I actually want to make a note. A trope I noticed in a lot of the romance pitches. The behind the scenes of a reality TV show is something that turned up quite a lot. I think that must be like the new vampires. Like in the setting of like a Vanderpump Rules or a Made in Chelsea seems to be the new popular setting for romances. So do we want to pick I Blame the Edit or Thea's Flamingos? Tom, what's your choice?
Oh, I think in a way this is. I mean, I think Thea's Flamingos is definitely the more interesting of the two pictures and more distinctive. I think my slight hesitation is there's not much romance in there. So if we were choosing the pitch for the best romance book, I think I Blame the Edit is possibly a bit more romancy, but again, there's not as much romance in there as there could be, and actually, Thieves Flamingos could quite easily have fitted in the general category as well. But I think out of the two, I think just from its distinctiveness, I'm going to go for Thieves Flamingos.
I agree. I think that the reality TV pitch was probably a better romance pitch. But just in terms of a pitch making me want to read more of the book, I think that Thea's Flamingos was most effective for me. So my vote goes to the pink burbs as well.
All right, Thea's Flamingos. So we now have our finalists. Port of Old John, Bear Friends Forever, Made for Murder, 10 Years Down the Drain, and Echoes of Oblivion. While our judges here pick their final choices and put them in order, I'm going to cut to another commercial break. Pitch Wars is also brought to you by Reedsy Marketplace, the world's top network of publishing freelancers. We make it simple for you to access the right professionals who can help you write and publish a great book. Looking for feedback and guidance on your manuscript? Why not get a developmental edit from someone who's worked for authors like Neil Gaiman and Suzanne Collins? Want a cover design that will get readers excited about your book? Hire the people who have made best-selling dust jackets for George R.R. Martin and Stephen King. Need a query letter that will get your book picked up? Reach out for a helping hand from experienced agents like our very own John Darger. You can request quotes from up to 5 professionals at a time with no obligation to hire. With Reedsy, you'll have peace of mind knowing that we've vetted each and every professional on our platform, ensuring not only that they are who they say they are, but that they're also the best in the biz. Head to Reedsy.com and meet them today. Okay, and we are back. Okay. I created a scoring system that was supposed to give us a good set of finalists in order. I mentioned to both John and Tom that there was a non-zero chance that it would mess up, but it fully has because we have a 4-way tie for first.
I think you have to make a lot of T-shirts, Martin.
Well, I'll make a lot of T-shirts, but you know what? I'm going to give it to everyone who has come in here in there. All right, I'm going to reveal the winners, all 4 number 1 winners, in just a second. Oh, here we are. 10 Years Down the Drain, Echoes of Oblivion, Thea's Flamingos, and Bear Friends Forever, the joint winners. Thank you very much to everyone who sent in their pitch. I hope you actually learned a lot from this experience. I want to thank John and Tom. This is, of course, a work in progress. If you have any feedback, send it to martin@reedsy.com. I'm sure, judging by the comments on the side there, I'm going to be inundated with hate mail. But I really enjoyed this. I hope you've all learned quite a lot. And yeah, John, you are, of course, an editor here on Reedsy. What sorts of projects are you generally looking for from us?
All kinds. I do full manuscript edits. I read the manuscript and write edit letters about what works, what doesn't, and how you go about changing or improving what doesn't. But I edit across all genres, including genres that I don't represent as an agent, because those are just different parts of my brain and different skill sets. In fact, I've edited many sci-fi fantasy manuscripts for Reedsy that is a genre that I do not represent as an agent. So I focus on making it the best story possible, and figuring out what the author's vision is and how we can best accomplish and achieve it.
And Tom, can you tell us a bit about the next cohort of your novel writing course?
Yes, so I think the next group is starting right at the beginning of July. I think it is July the 1st is the starting date. So we've got a good number of people already signed up. So if you're interested in getting stuck in and wanting to write that first draft over the summer, do have a look at it on the reedsy.com/learning on the site there. And I think you mentioned with your very nice music. I'm very jealous of your music, by the way, in the advert with the discount code.
Tom, I licensed it for $60. It's ours to use forever.
Why don't we get music? How come you can get music and we don't?
Because I've got the company credit card, Tom. This is a full abuse of Reedsy resources. Anyway, thank you to everyone. We'll be in touch with the winners there. And yeah, we'll no doubt host another one of these in the coming months. We'll find a way to rejig it, sort of try and make this perhaps a little bit tighter. But I really want to thank you both. Such great insights. I think everyone's learned an awful lot from those. All right. Thank you, everyone who's stayed all the way to the end. See you next time. Bye.